You know, usually when you find yourself stuck in a waiting room, the entire goal is simply to get your name called so you can leave.
Right, exactly. You definitely don't unpack your bags.
No. And you certainly don't ask for, like, a hammer and some nails to hang up family photos on the walls.
Yeah, that would be completely bizarre. You just sort of sit on the edge of that really uncomfortable plastic chair.
Just staring at the door,
Yeah.
vibrating with this desperate, almost, visceral need to escape the room.
Because you treat the space as an interruption. And humans don't invest in interruptions, you know? We just try to endure them.
Right. Holding our breath until our real life can resume. But imagine the door finally opens, and instead of calling your name to let you out, the receptionist just walks over,
Okay.
and they hand you a heavy bag of potting soil, a handful of seeds, and some tools. And they just casually say, actually, you're going to be in this room for the next 70 years. You might want to start planting.
Oh, wow. I mean, that is just a profoundly offensive level of discomfort.
Exactly. And that discomfort is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're exploring a really fascinating intersection of ancient history, spiritual identity, and, well, the human psychology of waiting.
It's such a rich topic.
It really is. And our guide for this today is a specific chapter, Day 11, which is titled Gardens in Exile, from a 50-day devotional called Living Hope, written by Pastor Rob Bailey of South Lake Church.
Yeah, and this specific day in the devotional serves as this brilliant lens for the topic because it takes this word that we throw around constantly in our culture, hope,
Right, right.
and it completely strips away the modern, highly sanitized greeting card version of it.
Because for you listening, and honestly for me too, I think hope is a word we often use as just like a synonym for a quick fix.
Yes, the expectation of an instant rescue.
Exactly, from whatever is causing us discomfort. So our mission today is to explore a deeply challenging paradox.
Yeah.
What if true hope actually requires settling into the very situation you desperately want to escape?
Which is so counterintuitive.
Completely. We're going to look at the biblical concept of the exile to discover how a person can actually find usefulness and deep meaning in life's long middle.
And to really understand the psychology of this, we have to ground it in the historical reality that Pastor Bailey uses in the text.
Right, the Old Testament context.
Yeah, he takes us to the prophet Jeremiah. Specifically, he's looking at verses 4 through 14 in chapter 29. And we have to understand the sheer level of trauma happening here.
It's massive.
It is. The Israelites have been completely conquered by the Babylonian Empire.
And this isn't just, a political defeat. They have been violently ripped from their homeland.
Dragged across the ancient world.
Yeah. And they're now living as captives in a foreign, really hostile empire. Their temple is destroyed. Their national identity is shattered.
Their entire worldview has effectively collapsed. So psychologically, they are sitting in the ultimate waiting room. Their bags are packed in their minds. They are operating in this constant state of fight or flight, basically anticipating that God is going to smash the Babylonian Empire at any second.
Like, he's just going to instantly teleport them back to Jerusalem.
Exactly. So they are entirely detached from their current surroundings because they view Babylon strictly as a prison they are about to leave.
But then Jeremiah delivers this message from God. And it is a shockingly counterintuitive command.
It really is. God doesn't tell them to stay vigilant for an imminent rescue.
No. He tells them to build houses, to plant gardens, to marry, have children, and maybe the hardest part to swallow, to actively pray for the welfare of the city of Babylon.
The very city that enslaved them.
Yes. And then he drops a timeline, 70 years.
Which, if you think about the neurological impact of that timeline, a 70-year sentence to an ancient population essentially means you are going to die here.
Yeah, your children will grow up here.
Right. God is forcing a massive cognitive pivot. He's telling them to stop treating their current reality as a temporary waiting room and start treating it as a garden.
I genuinely struggle with this reading of it, though. I have to push back a little.
Oh, for it.
Because we have to look at the most famous verse in that entire passage, Jeremiah 29.11. People put it on coffee mugs.
Oh, yeah. Graduation cards, bumper stickers.
Exactly. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a future and a hope. If God is promising a bright future and a hope, why on earth does he lock them in a hostile empire for an entire lifespan? Like, how do we reconcile a promise of a bright future with being told to die of old age and captivity? Isn't hope supposed to be an extraction plan?
And that tension right there is the crux of the entire devotional. We constantly equate hope with extraction, like you said.
We think hope means get me out of here.
Yes. But if you look at the mechanism of what God is actually doing in this text, the promise of a future doesn't cancel the long middle. It actually injects meaning into it. Hope isn't the escape hatch. Hope is the anchor that allows the human mind to survive the delay.
Oh, wow. Okay, so God naming the 70 years isn't a cruelty. It's like a boundary.
Exactly. It removes the exhausting anxiety of the unknown. I mean, if you think you might be rescued tomorrow, you can't sleep tonight.
Right, you're in a permanent state of adrenaline.
Okay, yeah. By establishing a 70-year timeline, God is saying, you are not abandoned in Babylon, but you are not being rushed out of it either.
Wow.
Their calling is to live faithfully exactly where they are, trusting the God who will eventually, generationally bring them home.
So it completely redefines hope from just wishing for a sudden exit to actually working with purpose in the painful present.
That's beautifully put, yes.
But let's bring this out of ancient Babylon for a second, because obviously the people listening right now aren't ancient Israelites displaced by an empire.
Thankfully, no.
So how does this framework of the long middle map onto a modern person's daily life?
Well, the devotional makes a really crucial link here by bringing in the New Testament. If we fast forward a few centuries, the Apostle Peter takes this exact same framework.
Okay.
And he applies it to the spiritual identity of anyone who follows Christ. The book of 1 Peter explicitly calls Christians spiritual exiles.
Meaning, if you are a Christian, your ultimate home and your ultimate citizenship aren't rooted in this temporary world.
Right. They're rooted in a future permanent reality with God.
Which brings up a really vital psychological and theological principle from the text, which is identity comes before activity.
Yes, that's such a key takeaway from week 2 of the study. First Peter states that Christians are exiles whose inheritance is guarded by God.
Guarded by God.
Yeah, that identity is firmly established, it's locked in, and it's secured before they are ever handed a list of things to do.
But this is where my brain hits like a logical wall again.
Okay, let's hear it.
The text uses this phrase, rooted exile, and it just sounds like a complete oxymoron to me.
It does sound like a contradiction.
Right. If you are fundamentally displaced, someone wandering away from their true, permanent home, shouldn't you treat your current surroundings with complete detachment?
You'd think so, yeah.
I mean, if my true home is somewhere else, why shouldn't I treat this world like a cheap motel? How can someone whose identity is exile also be a gardener who seeks the deep welfare of a foreign city? Aren't exile and rootedness total opposites?
I get why that's confusing. The human brain struggles with this because we tend to operate on a spectrum of either total assimilation or total detachment.
Exactly. Pick one.
But let's look at the psychology of cognitive load for a second. When a human being is terrified about their ultimate survival or anxious about their fundamental identity, 100% of their mental energy goes towards self-preservation.
You're just trying to survive the day.
Right. You cannot selflessly love a neighbor or invest in a community if you are starving for personal security. You'll just use the people around you to prop up your own ego and safety.
Oh, that makes so much sense. It's like the psychology of a short-term high-stress rental agreement.
Ooh, say more about that.
Well, say you're renting a house on a precarious month-to-month lease. Right. And you have this hostile landlord who might kick you out at any second.
Nightmare scenario.
Exactly. You don't unpack your boxes. You certainly don't spend your weekend planting a beautiful oak tree in the backyard or joining the neighborhood association.
And of course not.
You live out of suitcases because your entire environment feels like a threat to your stability.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Okay, now apply the theology of 1 Peter to that rental house. What if an infallible authority guarantees that your ultimate, perfect, permanent home is already built?
Okay.
It's fully paid for, and it's currently being guarded for you.
Oh, wow. Then the existential dread just evaporates.
The dread completely vanishes. And what happens to all that cognitive and emotional bandwidth that was previously tied up in panic?
It gets freed up.
Exactly. Because your ultimate identity and final inheritance are perfectly secure, you no longer have to live in a state of frantic self-preservation.
So you don't have to extract your entire sense of worth from your current job or your current city or your current social status.
No. So the detachment from the world isn't about ignoring the world. The detachment is what actually allows you to serve it.
Because you don't need the city to validate your existence. You are finally free to actually seek its welfare.
That is the exact mechanism of the rooted exile. Jeremiah shows us how this plays out. They aren't rootless wanderers floating above the reality of their pain, and they aren't assimilating and forgetting who they are either.
They plant, they pray, they invest.
Yes, the certainty of their destination is the exact fuel that unlocks their ability to be useful in the delay. Identity precedes activity.
Wow. Secure people can afford to plant gardens in hostile territory.
Exactly right.
Okay, so we've established the goal here, planting, praying, seeking the welfare of the places we feel stuck in. But practically speaking, how does a human being actually endure a prolonged season of waiting without entirely burning out?
That's the real question, isn't it?
It is. Because knowing my identity is secure, in theory, is wonderful. But when year 5 of chronic illness or year 10 of a dead-end career turns into year 20, sheer emotional exhaustion sets in.
Yeah, and the text doesn't offer a shallow platitude here, which I appreciate. It completely acknowledges that the present reality of exile can be agonizing.
Yeah.
To survive the attrition of the long middle, the devotional points to the ultimate anchor. It moves the focus entirely toward Christ and the reality of the resurrection.
There's a line in the text that actually arrested me when I read it. Resurrection does not make the present painless, but it does make the future certain.
That's such a powerful quote. We have this profound tendency as humans to equate our pain with abandonment. When we're hurting, our nervous system fires off warning signals that something is fundamentally wrong, or worse, that we are entirely alone.
Right. So if you're stuck in a painful delay, that ongoing suffering feels like empirical proof that God has simply forgotten you in the waiting room. It reminds me of the psychological difference between the pain of an injury and the pain of physical therapy.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, if you suffer a catastrophic leg injury, the pain is terrifying because it represents destruction.
Right, things are falling apart.
Yeah. But let's say a surgeon perfectly repairs the leg and guarantees a full recovery. The physical therapy the next morning is still agonizing.
Oh yeah, rehab is brutal.
Right. The rehab hurts immensely. But the pain of physical therapy is fundamentally different from the pain of the initial injury, isn't it?
It is entirely different because the context of the pain has changed. The initial injury is the pain of unmaking. The physical therapy is the pain of restoration.
Yes.
The guarantee of a healed leg doesn't act as a magical anesthetic that numbs the pain of rehab, but it does give the brain a framework to endure it.
Because the pain is no longer a signal of impending doom.
Exactly. Resurrection does not make the present painless, but it does make the future certain. The resurrection operates like that surgeon's guarantee. The text explicitly reassures us that the God who raised Jesus from the dead has not forgotten his people in the waiting. I mean, the empty tomb is the ultimate proof that God does not abandon his own, even in the grave.
Therefore, he hasn't abandoned you in your specific exile.
Exactly. The resurrection takes the pain of the long middle and categorizes it. It proves the suffering isn't the final word.
So you don't have to wait for the pain to stop before you start living. You can hold the pain of the present and the absolute certainty of the future in your hands at the exact same time.
It is a mature, incredibly difficult spiritual posture. But exile and usefulness really can exist side by side.
Yeah.
Because if the future is guaranteed by the resurrection, then the mundane, exhausting, everyday acts of faithfulness in the present actually carry cosmic weight.
Wow. So sweeping the floor, doing your taxes, loving a difficult neighbor, or enduring an illness with grace, these aren't wasted time in a forgotten waiting room.
No, they aren't. They are acts of defiant hope.
Which brings this profound theological concept all the way down to the ground for you listening right now. Because we always want to connect the core of these deep dives to your actual physical Tuesday morning.
Yeah, application is everything.
And the devotional offers a highly practical next step, and it's beautifully simple. It suggests taking a moment today to pray for the good of one specific place where you are stationed right now.
And notice it doesn't say pray for the place you wish you were. It demands you look at the place you actually occupy.
Yes. So maybe that is your current neighborhood, even if you spend every evening browsing real estate listings wanting to move.
Right.
Maybe it's your workplace, even if you are desperately hunting for a new career path. Maybe it's a difficult classroom or just the city you live in.
Yeah, you can acknowledge the friction and the reality of your exile while simultaneously asking God to bring usefulness, peace, and goodness to that exact spot.
It is the daily, lived application of Jeremiah's command to the captives in Babylon. Seek the welfare of the city where you find yourself exiled.
Because your presence there is not an accident, even if it feels like an interruption.
To close out our exploration of this text, I want to share the language of the daily prayer provided in Pastor Bailey's devotion.
It's a wonderful prayer.
It's incredibly grounded. It asks God to keep the reader from despair in the long middle. It asks for patience for the waiting, faithfulness in those completely ordinary callings, and confidence that the future is ultimately secure in Christ.
Hmm.
And it ends with this vivid phrase, asking that hope grow roots even in hard soil.
That phrase perfectly encapsulates the paradox of the rooted exile. Hope grow roots even in hard soil.
Yeah.
It doesn't ask for the soil to magically become soft and accommodating.
Yet,
It asks for the roots to be resilient enough to penetrate the rock anyway. It relies on the strength of the seed, not the comfort of the dirt.
as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into your day. We've explored how God's ultimate plan for the Israelites wasn't just to warehouse them in a holding cell, but to have them bring literal gardens, life, and prayer to the very empire where they felt the most trapped.
Such a paradigm shift.
So look at the geography of your own life. Think about the places where you feel the most stuck, the most delayed, or just the most frustrated by a lack of progress.
Yeah.
What if those exact places, those uncomfortable waiting rooms you are so desperate to escape, are actually the very soil where your greatest, most unexpected impact is waiting to bloom?
That's the real question.
So the next time you find yourself sitting in that metaphorical waiting room, staring at the door, vibrating with the anxious need to leave, take a breath and look down at your hands. You might just be holding a bag of seeds.